Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spiritual Dessert. I am Pastor Michael from The Current in Naples, Florida. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you have a beverage or a snack or some lunch with you, and that you'll join in the conversation here. Spiritual Dessert is meant to be a place where we can chat with each other about our different ideas about what it means to be a spiritual being, a person of faith, somebody who is religious. This is a place for us to discuss what it means to be religious in the 21st century and what our affiliations with religions mean to us. A lot of us these days identify as spiritual but not religious, and we've done our best as a community at The Current to make it a welcoming place for especially people who may consider themselves spiritual but not religious. And even though we are a Christian community, Jesus is the focal point of our studies. We accept and understand and love people from all different walks of life, and including all sorts of different faiths, because I believe that there is an intersection of love, compassion, and service to one another in all of the different faith systems throughout the world: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, you name it. All of the masters of those religions, the people who revealed those messages and teachings to us, all talk about love and love unconditional. So we do our best to practice that at The Current as well. At the beginning of Advent, we had a lovely Zen master speak, and I have a Jewish background. We talk a lot about Hinduism, and of course we focus on Jesus as a spiritual teacher, as a Jewish rabbi, and talk about him within his context. So if you have any questions about any of that, about progressive Christianity, about postmodern religion, please feel free to type them in the box, and I'll try to respond to them in real time as well. This is meant to be a conversation between all of us. It's not just me sort of yapping at you about the things I believe. I want to know what you think about being religious as well, about how you maintain hope and faith in a difficult era. And while we get started, I'll just give you sort of a recap of what we've been talking about at The Current this week. On Sunday, we continued our Advent theme of illumination, of the illuminating light of God, of God's love, and how that affects us, our families, and our communities. And this week, we talked about this idea of communal tendencies, about being people that live in community one another. And I think it's topical in an era when we are retreating into sort of closed off communities, walled gardens, gated communities, to discuss the idea of Christian community. Because, you know, while in America, Christians often get a bad rap, and appropriately so. The popular portrayal of Christianity is as a closed-minded walled garden that doesn't accept anybody, that hates homosexuals. And while that is true for an unfortunately large portion of Christians in America, Christians like myself and Christian communities like ours are open and inclusive. We understand God as loving all of us without condition, and we understand Jesus' message of one that talks about God's love for all of us without exception. So the first followers of Jesus, who were all Jewish, also understood Jesus' message as one of absolute and unconditional inclusive love. They also understood that in order to live into this ideal, they were going to have to think differently about what community means. And they also lived in a world where community was sort of organized along social structures of wealth and power. I mean, this is the ancient way of human beings, and in that way we have changed very little. Our societies are still based on structures that favor those who are wealthy and powerful. But Judaism in general has always disfavored the wealthy and the powerful. And Jesus specifically despised the idea that society would be organized along the lines of whoever is wealthiest and whoever has the biggest armies gets to rule everything and make up the laws. Jesus says, no, we must remember our roots, and our roots, our Jewish roots, tell us that God is the ultimate monarch. God is sort of the ruler of all things, and God, being righteous and just, wants all of us to have all we need all the time. And in order to create that reality, we have to learn how to live in a community that shares all of our resources with one another unconditionally. It's not you get this much if you pay this much, or you get this much if you do this much. It's we all get this much because we all need this much. And the intention behind this idea is that if every individual is well fed and well educated and warm and safe, that the entire community thrives because of this. Because we don't have a community then that has to take care of people and spend all of their resources caring for people who have been sort of disabused by the system. Because our system is one that makes sure everybody is allowed to live into their highest potential. Ken Gregson's online. I see that, and I'm so happy to say that. Ken is a colleague of mine in the Disciples of Christ denomination. What you got to say, Ken? Let me see. I've got to hit this little see more tab. Many Christians who think homosexuality is a sin do not hate homosexuals. Sometimes we progressive Christians make their position seem worse than it is. That's true too, but I would also suggest that on that side where people who think homosexuality is a sin, it's still an exclusive sort of view, because you're saying, well, I don't agree with who you are, I think is in essence what those people are saying. And I think that what Jesus wants us to understand is we unconditionally say, I agree with who you are. Not only I agree with who you are, but I love who you are just the way God loves who you are as well. I don't think there can be any exceptions in this, especially, again, if we're going to create this community that shares with one another. And also, if we're telling people, I love you, but I don't like what you do or who you love, we're not giving them the room they need to live into their highest potential and to be their truest selves. I think part of what Jesus preaches is this ideal that Aristotle talks about, this regulative ideal. I think Jesus actually, as a literary figure, is intended to be Aristotle's regulative ideal. And this is this virtuous person. And Aristotle theorized that in order for people to be virtuous and really kind of to live in peace and harmony with one another, that individuals had to also be happy. And we had to be free to pursue our ultimate happiness. So if we're involved in any system that says, well, you're okay, but this part of you isn't, that doesn't allow us to be free enough to pursue our own individual happiness, which we must be free to pursue if we're going to create a community then that thrives. So as an inclusive being, right, and as people who follow this inclusive being, Jesus, the Christ, I think it behooves us to strive to expand our idea of what community is, and strive to create societies that provide the mechanisms for everyone to follow their path, to reach their highest potential, to be happy, truly to be happy. I read an interesting article the other day that says that this quest for happiness, this sort of drive that humans have to be happy, is built into our DNA. So when Aristotle argues that for members of a society to perform their individual functions well, the society must provide the channel for them to do so, it's encoded into us to do that. So the fact that we currently live in societies all over the world that insist we should be fighting with each other kind of goes against our genetic coding. I would suggest that even this Christian idea of original sin was not really a Jesus idea, but we won't get into that. But this idea of sin, I would say, is even misguided, because we're not genetically coded to be sinful. We're genetically coded to be happy. We're genetically coded to provide service to each other, because research also shows that we are happiest when we're serving each other. So pretty much everything we're doing right now goes against who we are and who we're created to be. So I'm hoping that throughout Advent we'll think a little bit more deeply about what it really means to be in Christian community. Because to me, that doesn't mean I'm only in community with other Christians. Whew, most of the time that would drive me insane anyway. It means that I'm in community with everybody in the world through the being of Christ, which I understand to be cosmic love, this universal thread of love that runs through everything. I don't believe we need to acknowledge Jesus in order to experience God. And I believe that what Jesus teaches us is that in order to truly experience God, we must experience love and service for and with one another. That's what we've been talking about at the Current this week. If any of you have any questions or or topics you'd like to discuss about this or anything else, feel free. Please type them in the comment box, and I'll respond. And even after the fact, if this sparks any interest, please comment, and we will do our best to respond and continue the discussion. At the current, we strive to include everybody's voice in the discussion. Even on Sunday, after I give a little presentation like this, we all sit around and talk about it for a little while. I believe we are all on spiritual journeys, that in fact the entire universe is on a spiritual journey, and that our contribution to it should be to listen with intention to each other, to understand where we're each at, and never to try to change anybody, with the only exception being that if we are not participating in the realm of love, and if our belief systems don't lead us to love one another unexclusively, then maybe we should try to help each other out, but again, as lovingly as possible. Ken says a great point about serving others, enriching our own happiness. The strive for our own happiness can become overly self-centered. Absolutely right. And I saw one of our other colleagues, Joseph Pusateri, posted a similar sentiment today about being willing to sort of bask in the love of God, and understanding that even in serving the common good, we are enriching our own lives, but doing it with humility and understanding that it's never really for us or about us, because as Jesus proclaimed, it should always be about God. And again, to get back to where we started today, our communities, our social structures, the way we view property, whether it's private or public, all of these things should be looked at once again through the lens of it belonging not to us and not to our nation or our country, but belonging to God. And therefore intended to be equally distributed amongst all of us. Now, how do we make that sort of society a reality on a large scale, on a national scale? I think this is the challenge, the real challenge for Christianity in the 21st century. If we really want to be the change makers that we say we are and that we strive to be, then the change we should be working for is universal love and global peace. We must be globalists, by the way, and we must be involved in politics, because the only way to change the system is to create one that takes over the existing one. So as we work through alternative economies and alternative ways to participate with one another, let's share our ideas and let's start working for the common good, so that together, all of us, not just one of us, might thrive in God's love. Well, thank you for joining me today. And Ken, thank you very much for chiming in. I wish more people would do that, because I would really like this to go back and forth a little bit more. You said God created the universe with enough for everyone. Sadly, we have systems and cultures of haves and have-nots. Exactly. And I would say again that perhaps our greatest task as purveyors of Jesus's love in this century is to create this alternative community that he envisioned, and that the Jewish people really tried to implement for thousands of years. So we should be able to share all of our resources for the common good, because there's enough to go around. All we have to do is rethink the way we've structured the gleaning, the packaging, and the distribution of these resources. And it is not that difficult a task, folks. We can do it. All it takes is a little initiative and a lot more compassion and love. So let's continue to pray for God's light to just shine through every single one of us and dissolve away the fear and hatred that's so dividing our entire world these days. I pray that all of you will experience the love of God throughout the week and throughout the holiday season that's upon us, over Hanukkah and Christmas and Ramadan. Whatever it is you're celebrating this holy season, I hope that you will experience the love of God welling up from within you, so that it bursts forth in your life, bringing you comfort and peace, and showing the rest of the world what the light of love looks like. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for tuning in today.